When I was a kid, I would go to a summer camp every year called Camp Windshape, which was a Christian summer camp program founded by the same people behind Chick-fil-A. It's like a 2-week thing, so you're staying overnight with a whole bunch of other guys. There's also a girls' camp, but you're separated and then you come together for like one day to do a dance or a relay or something like that. I don't really remember. It was like a mixture of faith-based teaching with like sports and games, and it was fun. It was a summer camp, but you basically had to go to church every morning and evening, which I didn't mind. Really, I really just sat through it to get through all the games, and of course there were good teachings. Every now and then we'd dress up as Native Americans, and they'd do this thing called council ring, where we sing songs, and looking back at it, it was interesting. I don't want to say they did this to be racist, but it's definitely, insensitive. And they have, of course, stopped doing this. I think there are pictures of me dressed in the, I didn't really think too much of it as a kid. I had fun. So around 2014, I was there for my summer session, and I had a question for my counselor. During this time, the U.S. was bombing Syria as justified strikes against ISIS. And this was a point in my life as a young man where I began seeing the effects of war. And this wasn't like movies. This was real life. I was seeing on the news and online pictures of dead children. As a kid, I felt bad. This was very depressing. So during that session of my summer camp, I pulled my counselor aside and I asked him, hey, counselor, there's children, kids the same age as me that are being killed, dying in this part of the world. And from what I see, a lot of them are not Christian. Most of them are Muslim. I know our faith says that those who do not believe will go to hell. But what happens to these kids when they die? And some of them probably didn't even know what Christianity was. They're not Christians. What happens to them when they die? And he looked at me, and I felt like he was disappointed to say, well, they go to hell. And that probably wasn't the best answer that he could have gave me. But in retrospect, these counselors were kids. I mean, technically, they were in college. But, like as a kid, I was like, well, that makes sense. But that's always been something that I've always thought about in the back of my mind. And yeah. Now, this video isn't about personal faith or spiritual beliefs. I want to analyze what happens when Christian identity becomes a political weapon. Because despite the counselor telling me this, somebody told him this when he was a kid, probably. And somebody told them that. And I feel like that's just the wrong way to look at things. However, make no mistake, many Christians themselves reject the nationalist, bigoted politics that we're about to examine.
Texas, I've officially filed to become your next congresswoman. So the choice is yours. Vote for me so we can kick every dirty Muslim out of Texas, save your daughters from getting raped by Mohammed, and protect our soldiers from getting murdered in broad daylight.
Go back, AIPAC, go back. That's the AIPAC building right there. White Christian men are not going to sit around while you turn our children into a bunch of nigger lovers.
I mean, like, you want to go thought crime? Like, I'm sorry. If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. The Great Replacement Strategy, which is well underway every single day on our southern border, is a strategy to replace white rural America with something different.
I am opposed to tolerance. Tolerance is not a Christian virtue. And love in the Christian sense is very different from the kind of love that people talk about. But when he saw things that he didn't like, he literally cracked the whip. He brought the whip out. And that is what he wanted us to be, which is strong and assertive Christians, and to hate evil and to love goodness. And, this is not a country that does that. This is a country that is in love and infatuated with evil and hates, frankly, goodness.
This is not an attack on Christianity or spirituality. I want to talk about particular state-backed political ideology that uses Christian symbols and language to demand dominance.
It is about the forces of evil versus the people of Jesus Christ.
Yeah! Christ is king! 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 Christ is king!
And it is so refreshing to hear his name in American politics.
I want to dissect how, in the United States, Christianity is often weaponized as a tool of political power or racism, a way to claim moral authority, rally followers, and mask brutal policies behind this sacred facade. I want to make one thing clear. I don't think America has a Christianity problem. Christianity is not the problem. America has a power problem that has co-opted Christianity and wears it as a disguise.
Okay. You mentioned the Bible. You've been talking about how it's your favorite book. And you said, I think last night in Iowa, some people are surprised that you say that. I'm wondering what one or two of your most favorite Bible verses are and why.
I wouldn't want to get into it because to me that's very personal. You know, when I talk about the Bible, it's very personal. So I don't want to get into verses. I don't want to get into...
There's no verse that means a lot to you that you think about or cite?
The Bible means a lot to me, but I don't want to get into specifics.
Even to cite a verse that
you
like?
No, I don't want to do that.
You're an Old Testament guy or a New Testament guy?
Probably equal. I think it's just an incredible, the whole Bible is an incredible.
So how did personal faith become part of this political machine that we see today? To understand Christian nationalism, we have to examine Christianity in America, how it evolved from belief system into social infrastructure.
I'm being trained with thousands of others here at Campus Crusade as a part of a Great Commission Army to go out and spread the claims of Jesus Christ to the entire world.
At Campus Crusade for Christ, we recognize that aggressive Christianity is the only answer. We are training youth in this battle between the forces of God and the forces of anti-God to be revolutionaries for Jesus Christ.
When Martin Luther Kuhn is out in the streets agitating, why, I agitate back. And the uniform is very good for agitating. For appearing before a hearing, it's a mental battle of wits, not a battle of agitation.
We can have our country once again free. We can have it once again white. We can have it once again Christian. And above all, ladies and gentlemen, we can have it once again a Christian American republic with a wholesome atmosphere that every American can be proud of. I thank you all very much.
Well, this game affects the most intelligent of our children, and the pieces include white witches, wizards, necromancers, the clerics, that type of thing. It includes evil wizards. It's a white versus black witchcraft. The good versus evil is white versus black witchcraft. I mean, the gruesomeness of this game and the occult link to it.
Well, I know that when I did my message, and this has happened, I have letter after letter where people took the pieces. Now, there's sixes involved in the pieces of the game, but they'd take the pieces of the game, they would throw them in the incinerator or the fireplace, and screams would come out because there seemed to be some kind of spiritual forces inhabiting those pieces, and children would drop out of life. They didn't want to study anymore.
And you do have people in the days since Charlie's killing, we've seen exactly why our country so dearly needed his example. We've watched legions of far-left radicals resort to desperate acts of violence and terror because they know that their ideas and arguments are persuading no one. They know that they're failing. They have the devil's ideology.
Now, in theory, Christianity is about personal belief, salvation, and moral teachings. But in practice, especially in the U.S., it is long doubled as a system of social order.
In this day, as in ancient time, there are some who have not been given the privilege at this point of holding the priesthood of the church. Among those who do not have this privilege are those of African Negro ancestry.
The term priesthood requires some definition because this church has no professional clergy. Religious leaders are laymen, all males. At age 12, they are eligible for membership in the priesthood. Joining the priesthood is more important for Mormon boys than a christening for Catholics or a bar mitzvah for Jews. Young priesthood members serve communion, and only priesthood members can advance to positions of higher religious leadership. You cannot be a woman or a so-called Negro.
From the earliest days of European colonization, religion and governance were entangled. Puritans in New England enforced biblical law as civil law. Southern colonies used Christian justifications for enslaving Africans and subjugating Native Americans. The logic was that they were saving souls, even as they chained people up. In the 19th century, pro-slavery preachers routinely quoted scripture to argue that God ordained racial hierarchy. They preached that Africans were descended from the biblical Ham and cursed to servitude, or that slavery was a part of the natural order that God intended. Make no mistake, Christianity did not invent racism. It just gave racism a sort of holy sanction. It baptized racial hierarchy with verses and sermons, offering a moral alibi for economic brutality. And even after slavery, during segregation and Jim Crow, many churches, especially in the South, functioned as pillars of the status quo. Segregationists held up the Bible to claim that mixing races violated God's plan. Well into the 20th century, politicians defending segregation or opposing civil rights often did so with a Bible in hand, speaking of, quote, God's separation of races.
In the name of the greatest people that have ever trod this earth, I draw the line in the dust and toss the gauntlet before the feet of tyranny, and I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
Segregation. Would you say you're a segregationist?
Yes, and I believe in my term, or my definition of segregation, yes, and that is a segregationist is a person that loves his race enough, or other races enough, has enough of racial pride and integrity to want to preserve them. And I think a racist is one that doesn't care enough for his race or another race to where they don't care whether they're amalgamated or destroyed or not.
But as governor of the state of Georgia, did you go by the laws of God or by the laws of the state?
I go by the laws of God and by the laws of the state.
As you see fit.
What is...
No, sir, not as I do.
When overt racism became socially unacceptable, the religious framing became even more vital. Instead of bluntly claiming white supremacy, many shifted to coded phrases like traditional values, law and order. The language itself softened, but the underlying intent preserved a social hierarchy. Now, at the same time, it's important to note, Christianity has also inspired abolitionists, civil rights leaders, and social justice movements from Frederick Douglass to Martin Luther King Jr. Faithful Christians have fought oppression. That only underscores our point. The issue is not Christianity, it is how Christianity is used. The faith can motivate radical love, or it could serve as fuel for those defending or attempting to defend a social hierarchy. American history shows a pattern. Whenever certain people in their power felt dominance threatened, be it slaveholders, segregationists, or nativist politicians, they turned to Christian identity and rhetoric to shore up their authority. Over time, this has built an infrastructure, churches, religious colleges, media outlets, and political organizations intertwined in maintaining a particular social order. By the late 20th century, this fusion of religion and politics has been formalized into what we now call the religious right. Think of the moral majority in the 1980s or the Christian coalition in the 1990s.
There's been a moral permissiveness that has frightened millions of people. Some deeper national yearning in the country, a turning towards spirituality, a yearning for morality. And now in the realm of politics, it has come into discussion. Americans want more than anything else this year in their president, the spiritual quality.
The most important thing in my life is Jesus Christ.
Is America facing its best years ever, or a period of national decline?
They were essentially political machines. They realized that if you could mobilize churches, you could produce disciplined voting blocks. Sermons turned into speeches. Issues like abortion, school prayer, and family values became rallying cries that were as much about identity and power as about genuine moral debate. The result was formidable infrastructure. Mega churches that we know today, connected to political PACs, televangelists acting as kingmakers, and faith becoming a voting identity. Religion had not only become a personal guide, but it became a team jersey, a badge of political allegiance. So by the 2000s, and most certainly today, American Christianity in its dominant white evangelical form functions in many ways like a political party or a lobbying firm. It's an institution with vast networks of media, funding, schools, and voter outreach, all dedicated to advancing a certain vision of society. This is the context in which Christian nationalism thrives, a context where Christianity is not interfaith, it's outer identity linked to power. It's important to note that people are not born into this ideology. They're recruited and formed through a sophisticated pipeline. Decades ago, church attendance and family tradition might have been the main ways people adopted Christian nationalist views. However, today, there's an entire media and influencer ecosystem designed to shape Christianity into a political identity and draw people into the fold, especially young, impressionable people. Consider the world of right-wing Christian content online and on campus. Instead of Sunday school and sermons, we have Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok preachers and campus agitators who blend faith with partisan talking points. Outrage is the hook. For example, if you look at Turning Point USA and figures like Charlie Kirk, he wasn't a pastor, but he tours megachurches and universities rallying about how they, the liberals, or the secular elites, and the professors are attacking Christian America. In his rallies and videos, every political disagreement would become a clash between godliness and evil. He would frame a debate about tax policy as a question of biblical truth, or a university diversity initiative as an assault on Christian values. And young conservatives would eat this up because it feels rebellious and righteous, as if by owning the libs, they are doing God's work. Now, the genius of this pipeline is that it turns politics into entertainment and identity. On YouTube, titles like "Watch Christian Conservative Destroy Liberal Atheist," it racks up millions of views. The viewer, often a very young Christian who feels culturally marginalized on a secular campus, they're not surrounded by other Christians, they get a rush of vicarious victory. Politics becomes less about policy and more about smashing enemies in this culture war cage match. And as this content grips people emotionally, it also reshapes their identity. I'm not just a student or a young person. I'm a Christian soldier in a war for my country's soul. Now that's powerful. It taps into all the feelings of belonging, purpose, adventure, and faith. Don't get distracted now. This is also a business model. There's an entire outrage economy built on Christian nationalist themes. Influencers cry Christian persecution, and then they direct their viewers to subscribe, donate, buy merch, and attend their paid conferences. There's money in this. Churches sell books on spiritual warfare against the woke left. Online stores sell their t-shirts with slogans like Army of the Lord or Putting Christ Back in America. Outrage brings clicks, and clicks bring cash. Cash funds more content. It builds bigger churches. So how does a movement ostensibly about Christian morality latch onto figures like, Donald Trump, a man whose personal life and manners hardly exemplify any piety? During Trump's campaigns and presidency, he openly courted evangelical leaders, promising them judges who would, quote, protect Christianity, by which he meant outlaw abortion, curtail LGBTQ rights, and so on. In return, he asked for their blessing and their flock's votes, and both sides delivered. Trump installed the Supreme Court justices they wanted, and they turned out an overwhelming vote for him. At the 2024 election, for example, over 80% of white evangelical Protestants voted for Trump, making them the most loyal Republican voting bloc. Their support was so robust that Public Religion Research Institute noted white evangelicals were the single most Trump-friendly demographic group in the country. And this wasn't a fluke. This is a result of years of messaging that political loyalty is a mark of faith. It's weird, though. Many of these same evangelicals once claimed that character counts in presidents, like back in the Clinton era. But with Trump, it seems that there are discarded concerns about adultery, vulgarity, lies, or cruelty. Why? Because Christian nationalism doesn't require the leader to be a saint, only to be a vessel. He gave them federal judges who handed down decisions aligned with conservative Christian values. He moved the U.S. Embassy to Israel and Jerusalem, pandering to end-times prophecy beliefs some evangelicals hold. He filled his rallies and speeches with rhetoric about Judeo-Christian heritage. He performed Christian nationalism, even if he doesn't even live a Christian life, and that was enough. Now, this reaches mystical proportions. A PRI survey survey in 2024 found that 2/3 of Americans who identify as Christian nationalist adherents believe that Trump's presidency was ordained by God. Think about that. For millions, Trump wasn't a candidate that they liked. He was literally chosen by the Almighty to lead America. When a political leader is imbued with that kind of divine mandate in the minds of followers, it's almost cult-like. Well, it is cult-like. MAGA. MAGA, bro. MAGA. For Trump, these benefits are clear. He's got an army of intensely loyal foot soldiers. I mean, quite literally. White evangelicals and other Christian conservatives have extremely high voting and activism rates. A built-in turnout machine that could swing elections. They show up for him in high droves, and he knew that they would. And this arrangement shows that Christian nationalism is not about doctrinal purity or even religious consistency. It's about defending identity and power structure. The belief that the American state should explicitly be Christian, that the laws should enforce particular Christian moral views, and that political authority should rest with those who are true Christian.
The Bible said that we take the violence, take it, and we take it by force. We are here to ready to take this nation back. And I believe without a shadow of a doubt, the only man that God has anointed here in 2024 to be the next president of the United States of America. And that is Donald J. Are you ready, America?
At its core, it's a narrative that America was founded by and for a certain type of Christian, usually implied to be white, Protestant, and conservative, and that this arrangement needs to be preserved or restored. Christian nationalism says America belongs to us, to the Christian in-group. Our culture, our religion should dominate public life, and if you disagree, you're not a real American. And opposing our political agenda is tantamount to attacking our faith. Hierarchy is at the heart of this ideology. It's about who sits above whom in society. Christian nationalists believe that in a divinely sanctioned order, men are above women, Christians are above non-Christians, native-born are above immigrants, straight above gay, and commonly white above non-white. And not every Christian nationalist will admit to the racial part, but it's deeply embedded in the history and dog whistles of the movement. The idea of a real American in this framework has historically meant white and Christian. During segregation, this theology was explicit. White supremacists argued that God created separate races and wanted them separate. However, in modern times, overtly racist language is less common, but it survives coded as talk about, culture, or heritage, or Western civilization. If you listen closely, when they say restore America's Christian heritage, there's often an undertone of restoring a time when others, or non-whites or non-Christians, knew their place. It's also telling that anxiety about demographic change often correlates with Christian nationalist sentiment, as white Christians have declined from an overwhelming majority of U.S. populations in past decades to around 42% today. The cry of Christian values being under attack has grown louder. By framing it as a religious fight, they avoid explicitly saying white people are losing dominance, but the subtext is all there. Let's make one thing clear. The United States was not founded as a Christian nation by law. The Constitution never mentions Christianity. And in fact, the Founding Fathers explicitly forbade religious tests for office and established a secular government where church and state were separate. The First Amendment prevents the government from establishing any religion as official, and the founders, influenced by Enlightenment ideas, wanted to avoid the bloody history of European religious wars and state churches. They knew the dangers of mixing clerical authority with political power. However, Christian nationalists today either ignore these facts or try to rewrite history with claims like the founders were devout men who intended biblical law to guide us. Now, that's a complete myth. Nevertheless, the Christian nation myth is powerful because it gives a sense of legacy and entitlement. We're just trying to go back to what America was always supposed to be. Make America great again. Now, it wouldn't matter unless ideologies can actually shape the world. And they can. For Christian nationalism, this all crosses over in legislation, court rulings, and public institutions. This is where the movement's abstract ideas turn into very concrete rules for everybody, whether you share the same faith or not. We've lived through a big example of this recently, the outlawing of abortion in many states. For decades, the religious right fought to overturn Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court decision that had protected abortion rights. In 2022, they succeeded with Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization, and numerous states immediately banned or severely restricted abortion, often with no exceptions for rape or health of the mother. These bans were explicitly lobbied for by Christian organizations and justified in religious terms. The sanctity of life from conception as a religious belief. The result is women and girls in some states being forced to carry pregnancies to term against their will. And that is Christian nationalism in action. What a particular theology holds, that life beginning at conception and is paramount, is imposed on millions who may or may not share that belief, for whom its imposition can cause great harm or death. This movement has not stopped at abortion. Contraception could be the next on the chopping block. LGBTQ rights are also another prime area. We've seen a wave of state laws justified by Christian values targeting transgender individuals' ability to get healthcare or even exist openly. Same-sex marriage, while nationally legal since 2015, is openly threatened by politicians who say Christian beliefs about marriage should take precedence. Religious freedom in this context has been redefined. Traditionally, it meant that you could worship as you please and the state can't prefer a religion. However, under Christian nationalist pressure, religious freedom is twisted to mean the dominant religion that serves exemptions from laws and even the right to dictate laws. You can see the same dynamic even outside formal court cases, and how Christian grievance narratives are socially and politically rewarded. In the University of Oklahoma, Samantha Fulnecki gained the national conservative attention after writing an essay and speaking publicly about feeling penalized in an academic setting for expressing her Christian beliefs. She wrote an essay and it got failed. It was essentially along the lines of, hey, this is not valid because my God says. Yeah, Samantha Fulnecki was rapidly elevated by conservative media after failing her essay, and invited into major platforms, brought into direct contact with right-wing political figures, including elected officials. And yeah, what matters here is not the specifics of her grade or the merits of the essay, not to mention the professor was dismissed from the college, but institutional feedback was transformed into a form of oppression. If a Christian experiences consequences within a secular institution, these consequences are reinterpreted not as a neutral enforcement of rules by this institution, the University of Oklahoma, but as hostility towards faith itself, and University of Oklahoma bent to this, which is interesting. What I'm trying to say is you could think of it this way. American theocracy does not need a pope. It does not need a supreme leader or a pastor. It can be implemented through laws, court rulings, and institutions like universities. Let's not forget public school battles. School boards have also become intense battlegrounds where Christian identity politics play out. There's fighting over sex education. Comprehensive fact-based sex ed is often gutted or replaced by abstinence-only curriculum championed by religious conservatives. More recently, the panic over critical race theory and LGBTQ-friendly books in libraries has been heavily driven by conservative Christian groups. They claim moral offense or parents' rights to justify banning books that acknowledge racism or feature gay characters, likening them to sinful or harmful material. Here again, religious morality is being used to restrict knowledge for everyone, not just their own kids. This is a form of imposing religion, meaning forcing others to live by your beliefs. This is precisely what the First Amendment was designed to prevent, yet through incremental legal changes, it's advancing. A large portion of the movement's energy comes from aggrieved entitlement, especially among young white men who feel they were promised authority, respect, and purpose and don't receive it. Christian nationalism offers a simple explanation. Society didn't change because the old model was unjust or obsolete. It changed because liberals, feminists, and secularism betrayed God's plan. And that offers a solution. Reclaim patriarchy, faith, dominance, and home in the nation. That's why traditional gender roles aren't really a side issue here. They're central. The movement is obsessed with reasserting hierarchy, especially male authority. Anything that disrupts that hierarchy, like women's independence, gender equality, or LGBTQ visibility, is framed as emasculation. And because masculinity is treated as a birthright rather than something earned or developed, the loss of it feels like theft. Once you've built an identity on God made me the rightful leader, the next step is predictable. You start treating disagreement as an attack, which is why a defining feature of Christian nationalism is persecution fantasy. Despite holding enormous cultural and political power, adherents are trained to believe that they are constantly under existential threat. Routine pluralism becomes oppression, neutral laws become hostility, and criticism becomes persecution. No doubt there are going to be people in the comment section, despite everything I've said, that this is not an attack on the Christian religion. They're going to be calling me, I don't know, a sinner, a nigger. I don't know. Just kidding. Just kidding. This narrative is emotionally useful because it lets a dominant group keep its power while claiming the moral status of the oppressed. And once you believe you're a victim in the holy war, escalation stops feeling like extremism and starts feeling like self-defense. If you believe the government is coming for your faith, then resistance feels righteous. That's what January 6th exposed in its rawest form. Many participants didn't experience themselves as overturning democracy or committing terrorism, as others may see it. They experienced themselves as defending a Christian nation against evil. Crosses, prayers, Christian flags. It was political violence experienced as a religious ritual. And when power feels divinely sanctioned, accountability becomes, well, optional, especially when you get pardoned for it. Ooh.
Hey, want to talk about the insurrection? Let me tell you something. You ain't seen the insurrection yet. You keep on pushing our buttons, you low-down sorry compromisers. You God-hating communist America, you'll find out what an insurrection is, because we ain't playing your garbage. We ain't playing your mess. My Bible says that the church of the living God is an institution that the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And the Bible says that we'll take it by force. That's what the Bible says.
When a movement lives inside that "we are under siege" story, real-world violence doesn't interrupt the narrative. The martyr framework becomes especially potent when tragedy occurs, because grief can be converted into proof. After the assassination of Charlie Kirk in 2025, a criminal act that should be unequivocally condemned, Christian nationalist leaders quickly framed his death as evidence that Christians were being hunted. The tragedy produced mobilization, vigils, fundraising, a renewed urgency to escalate the culture war, performances, a lot of them looking like they're straight out of The Boys episode. And that brings us to the part that matters the most. The real damage of Christian nationalism isn't theoretical. I don't care if people are Christian. I don't care if there are politicians that are Christian. What matters ultimately is that people are being affected by this negatively. Women lose bodily autonomy. LGBTQ people lose safety and legal protection. Religious and racial minorities are treated as outsiders in their own country. Democracy erodes when one faction claims divine right to rule and treats electoral defeat as illegitimate. Truth becomes negotiable. Education becomes ideological. And ironically, Christianity itself becomes collateral damage. The movement claims to defend Christianity, but in practice it discredits it, because what people see isn't spiritual life, it's political dominance wrapped in religious language. And yeah, I felt like this is kind of dragging, so that's all I have to say. And yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope maybe you learned something. I hope it like makes you think. Yeah, make it think a little bit about things. I don't know. Hope you're doing well, as always. Merry Christmas and happy holidays. And I will catch you in the next one. I love you, bro.